And yes, finally, let's do Baby Reindeer, which we said at the top of the show has been this series that went onto Netflix, not on the face of it, a hit show.
It's a word of mouth spreader.
It's an absolute word of mouth spreader. And I remember when someone we know at Netflix sort of mentioned to us, they said, "Oh, well, yeah, we got this show coming out called Baby Reindeer." And I was like, "What the hell is that?
Yeah.
Is that a kids show?" And they're like, "No, we think it's going to be. We think people might like it actually."
For all of the great stuff that Netflix does,
Yeah.
and all of combined with it is a load of stuff that you're never meant to watch for you,
Yeah.
and it just comes and goes. And so I'm always like happy to see great stuff on Netflix, because not because I root for the company, but because it's fun to see really great shows come out. But something about their scattergun approach to commissioning everything makes their wins feel really unintentional.
Yes.
And that, like, if you just keep buying that many tickets to the raffle,
Yes.
I'm less impressed when you win, but I'm still happy for you that it happened.
It's definitely a Netflix board meeting where they're like, "Hang on a minute. On the one hand, we had Three Body Problem, which we spent a huge amount of money on, and that has not pierced through into the cultural
Such an
mainstream.
expensive gamble.
And then you have this tiny show called Baby Reindeer that has been a global hit, not just in the UK, but global hit.
And
Anyway.
sorry, then like Ripley, I don't know if has got crazy
Ripley,
numbers.
no.
But like critically, I cannot sort of praise it enough. And I think people are slowly start to turn onto it. But it's it's not, I think for us it really works, but a lot of people are very much turned off by the black and white.
Ripley-
It's very slow, very noir.
It makes me very sad, actually, talking about Ripley. And again, if you do a spoiler tag, we'll talk about it, but it's just that it is a fantastic show. And I've not had a show like it where every single person I know who's watched it, we all think the same thing.
Yes.
That's very rare for me, you, my brother, my girlfriend, my parents, her mum, like to all agree unanimously.
It's brilliant.
But what's really sad is that critically, it got mixed reviews. People were sniffy.
it's true, yeah.
Yeah, we loved it, but critically, it got mixed reviews. People were sniffy about the black and white. People found it slow, and I find it so disappointing
Protective of the
because
film.
I'd love for them to make more, but I get the feeling that they were like, okay, and Netflix also, this wasn't originally a Netflix thing. They bought it from Showtime at some point during the production, and I wonder if Netflix would go, yeah, well, that would look good, didn't it? It was all very glossy and gorgeous, but didn't get enough stickiness with people, so that's it really, and that will be it. That will be the last we see of Andrew Scott's
I'll
Tom
be like
Ripley.
banging on the doors of the
I
Netflix
know.
office, be like, make more Ripley!
Yeah.
Make more Ripley!
Anyway, back to Baby Reindeer. So, like I said, someone had mentioned that they had this show coming on, but what actually piqued my interest to see it was that it's written and created by a comedian and actor called Richard Gadd. Now, Richard Gadd, I saw him do his Edinburgh show in 2015, a long time ago, and it was so funny. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. It wasn't just a comedy show. It was what is best about the Edinburgh Fringe. It's a mixture of theatre and comedy, and it was this whole concept show where he was late for his own gig and he actually only turned up for the last 5 minutes, and it included pre-recorded film shots. His techie was the one who had to do the jokes. There was like a live chat stream, and we were in the front row as well, so we got involved a little bit. It was great fun, and I remember thinking that guy was a real talent. It was one of the best things I've seen. And then I haven't really followed his career since, but then now we have Baby Reindeer, which is based off of a play that he had made called Baby Reindeer, and this is based on a real true life experience that happened to him. And as the show begins, it says, this is a true story. Now, it's important to say before we talk about Baby Reindeer that has been a huge sticking point for people as the show has got bigger and bigger, because it says this is a true story, which is a bold claim because really it's based
There
on
are
a true
reasons
story.
why everything is based on a true story.
There is artistic
legal
license.
reasons.
And there has been a lot of discussion about the responsibility of Netflix in producing a show like this to in becoming a hit. And in the world of social media, it draws a lot of attention to real people that were in this story. And there's a really good episode I recommend to people to listen to on The Rest is Entertainment, where they talk about the role of, in traditional television broadcasting, the role of compliance and compliance departments, and how Netflix has not done that. And this idea that perhaps because it was already a play, it was kind of pre-legalized. Go listen to that. I'm not going to get into that too much, but there is a whole discussion about the relationship between the real life facts in this.
Also, separately, new media has none of the red tape and sort of established practices that TV has had to standardize over decades. And there's a lot of, especially for YouTubers, and I think streamers are getting caught up in this as well. Like, a lot of my TV producer friends will look at the work of Mr. Beast and see the things that he like hides people on desert islands and gives away £100,000, and they're all like, "It's amazing, it's getting 100 million views," but that's because because it's illegal
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do that on a TV show, and he's just completely skipped it. And
Yeah.
there's a whole interesting conversation about whether all of that would be allowed.
And that's exactly what they were saying on The Rest is Entertainment about this show. They said that a lot of people in traditional TV were like, that shouldn't have been allowed to happen,
Yeah.
that the way they've done this show, which is a shame because it actually detracts from at the heart of what is a very interesting show and actually about a real true life experience that happened to Richard Gadd. So Baby Reindeer follows Richard Gadd's character of Donnie Dunn. And Donnie Dunn is his name.
Dunn.
That's it, Donnie Dunn.
Yeah.
That's his fictional name in this,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this thing. And he is working at a pub in London. He's a Scottish guy who's come down to London to try and be a stand-up comic. Is living a fairly depressed existence. He's living in his ex-girlfriend's mum's house with her.
Okay.
And he's working at this pub, which he doesn't really like. And he's obviously trying to get his comedy career off the ground, but he keeps, having terrible gig experiences. He's working in a pub in London one day, and this woman walks in, this woman who's probably in her early 40s, and, to strangers and to judgmental people, she's, overweight, frumpy, and comes in and she's crying. And he has this thing when he says, I saw her and I felt sorry for her. And then he says, which is an arrogant feeling to feel sorry for someone because it implies that you're better than them. And there's this sort of, the whole show is this first person, almost narrated entirely with bits of dialogue coming in, but it's his voiceover carrying you throughout, like he sat next to you telling you the story. This woman comes in, she's crying. He goes over and sees if she's okay. He offers her a cup of tea. And that's how this begins. This act of kindness. He offers her a cup of tea on the house, and he asks her her name. Her name's Martha. And this small act of kindness to this woman ends up opening a whole floodgate of attention from her. Now, she initially says that, she's from Scotland, but she lives in London. She's a very successful lawyer. She does consulting work for Ed Miliband and Alex Salmond and Nick Clegg.
When's that?
Mid last decade.
Right.
And he's like, okay. However, from their first meeting, which is perfectly benign and nice, she returns to the pub every day for all of his shifts, from the time his shift begins to the time his shift ends. And she just talks to him nonstop. And she claims to be a high-flying lawyer, except she spends 3 hours at the pub, where she claims she can't afford to buy a drink. So he always gives her a Diet Coke on the house. There's this kind of thing that he feels very sorry for her. He feels like the world has judged her. And there's this growing affection on her part, an obsession with him. And I should probably point out one thing I've missed, which is how the show begins. Sorry, because we got talking about this sort of extra stuff around the show. The very first scene of this show is Donnie Dunn walking into a police station and saying to the police person, I'd like to report something. And like, what is it? He's like, I think I'm being stalked, like harassed. And they're like, okay.
Great hook for
and they
a
were
TV
like,
show.
but is it by a man? They're like, no, it's by a woman. They're like, okay, have you had sexual relations with this woman? He's like, no. But like, she's calling me all the time. She's in my house. She's emailing me. And I think she needs help. And they're like, well, why did it take you so long to come here? And then they said, how long has this been happening for? And he says, about 6 months. She says, why did it take you so long? And then it cuts, and then it goes back to the beginning.
Nice, okay.
Sorry. So when
Good little
Martha
hook,
walks into the pub, you're already aware that this is the beginning of something sinister.
Right, okay.
Anyway, so the obsession begins. As a comedian, of course, he has an online profile. He has an email address on there. And soon enough, she finds his email address. And she is emailing him constantly, all the time, through every single hour of the day. Badly written emails with sent from my iPhone, written, typed out at the bottom of each email because sometimes it's misspelled. So that's send from iPhone. She's writing it out each time, even though she doesn't have an iPhone. So
really?
she's emailing it just to like give up this, this pretense. And the emails become sexual, almost like sexually provocative and invitational. And you have this awareness that this person is going fascination. And sure enough, by the end of the first episode, as you'd imagine from the beginning of the first episode, he realizes that he's being stalked by this woman who he discovers is a convicted stalker. And he's like, I have a convicted stalker stalking me. I have a convicted stalker stalking me. And there begins this episode in this character's life about this obsessive stalker and how it affects him and his relationships in his life. But more importantly, it's also like the overhanging question often is why Donnie makes or doesn't make certain decisions to mitigate and draw a line under this woman's attention to him. And the series explores, because a lot of time you'll be there thinking, well, why aren't you just calling the police? Why aren't you just doing something? And the series does do a good job of unpacking bit by bit why Donnie is the way he is. And I think the series is really, really interesting, and I think it's a good. I'm glad it's become a hit. It's on the surface of it, it is a very gripping, stalker thriller, and that's probably what's hooked people in the most, right?
Very
And
Netflix in that
absolutely gripping episodes. There are some that all these episodes are only about half an hour long, but they are like white knuckle ride watches, and I'm watching them with my hands on my face because even though there's nothing, of great action happening, the tension and the sinisterness is palpable. But at the same time, what works is that underneath the sinisterness and the uncomfortability of the show is it's actually very empathetic and complex about understanding people, damaged people, how people can damage people, and trauma, and that empathy and that emotion. A lot of the feelings I had a lot of it time were of great sadness, and that is what helps this story along, and it's not just this propulsive thriller. The Jessica Gunning, who plays Martha, is just fantastic at a performance. I mean, they both are. Richard Gadd is he's playing himself in this, but so he's playing Donnie, a character based on himself. But Jessica Gunning is this kindly, sweet, then fierce and nasty presence, and the way her face and her whole demeanor can change in an instant. In a second, she'll go from being sort of benign and almost like a warm presence that you feel completely unthreatened by, and then the next second you will feel like your blood run cold with this person's presence. And I think the way the series goes on to tackle some really serious, difficult stuff, and there are a couple of episodes that are really difficult to watch, but in a perfectly good way because it's about necessary and important things. I should say, really randomly, with the show becoming a hit, do you know who's a massive fan of this show? Is Stephen King. Stephen King has written a massive essay about it in the Times, basically saying it's one of the best things he's ever watched.
Wow.
And he believes every single episode is like a twist of a knife. And I'm like, that is so interesting. And in a way, because obviously Stephen King wrote Misery, which is about a kind of an obsessed stalker kind of character. That's really true. But all that kind of genre stalking stuff belies the greater emotional depth underneath it. And actually, there's almost as much in this. As much of it is that seems like a true crime story, there is elements to this that are like, I may destroy you. There are elements that is like Fleabag almost. I think it's something they pointed out on The Rest is Entertainment, and those observations are correct. It's a really interesting show about very dark, difficult things that tackles the matter with complexity and makes you feel. I love when you watch things that you don't have a binary emotional reaction. You feel conflicted, and you do feel conflicted in this. You feel fear, you feel anger, you feel sympathy. And I finished it this morning. I mean, I was obviously trying to finish it for this recording, and it's a show I struggled to ever watch more than one of at a time.
Right.
I find it particularly uncomfortable. But I finished it this morning, and I just thought that's a really interesting piece of work. That actually, when you hear about a breakout Netflix hit that's like about a stalker, you think it's going to be one kind of show, but actually, it's there. And I should just say as well, with Richard Gadd, what elevates the show is what is clearly the talent that he has. He's clearly a talented performer, and what I saw in that Edinburgh show 9 years ago is what I see in this show is that he's just a very good storyteller, and the thing is very well told and very well executed. Really, really interesting. And I can't talk about it with you unless you've seen it in a way, because I don't want to spoil stuff. And every episode will have you kind of on the edge of your seat. So, but if you have seen it and you want to give us your thoughts on Baby Reindeer, please send it in. We'll maybe do a spoiler discussion at some point.
It definitely sounds like a stranger than fiction story that you'd never believe it if it wasn't true.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the one sticking point is that because at the beginning it says this is a true story, that there are elements to the show that didn't quite happen, which I'm okay with because I accept dramatic license, but I do think they should have just said based on a true story.
Yeah, I really don't know, which cynically makes me think it's an extra hook to get you to keep watching. You won't keep watching, you won't believe it. Everything that was said was true. Yeah. And there's a shame that the story is that people have figured out who this person is or think they have figured out who this person is.
Yeah.
And the script is not lying true to reality.
And there's certain things that
I've not seen it.
People are believing, they think more steps should have been taken to hide the identity of true things. Anyway, it's a really interesting series and worth the hype, let's say.
Yeah, totally. Great. As always, hello at pulpkitchenpodcast.com. Moving on.